But you need to make an effort, and it's all about baby steps. It's not like you're going to wake up and you're going to be completely over all the things that happened in your marriage. You start going little by little, and before you know it, it will become second nature. And one day you'll wake up and it's like, oh my God, where have I been all this time? And then you can look
Yeah.
to the future with joy and excitement.
I'm Summer.
And I'm Mike.
And we got married with children.
It's been 12 years since we got this gang together.
And we're still running the rapids of living with a blended family.
And sometimes that is just not easy.
If you're looking for support and tools when it comes to divorce, step-parenting, co-parenting, and giving it your best,
you're in the right place.
We're talking about everything.
You ready to get this party started?
Always.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to another Everything Always podcast. I've got a fantastic guest today. Her name is Sonia Frontera, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her in just a minute. But first, have you ever felt like, this is especially for my divorced listeners, and even those who have just gone through separation or a breakup, just that feeling of feeling totally stifled and not knowing what to do next, and feeling like you are labeling yourself as something bad. You've put this stigma on yourself because you've gotten a divorce and now there's no hope for moving forward. Well, here's the thing. The troubles that you had in marriage are not the end of the road. They're actually a detour on the road to happiness. And that's what our guest today is talking about. She's all about speed forwarding your way from heartache to healing. And some of you may have been divorced for years, but there's things you just haven't let go of. And that's what we're talking about today, the effective strategies to heal your heart so that you can move forward. So whether you're unhappily married, maybe you are on the divorce road right now, maybe you're on the divorce recovery route, maybe you are years out of your divorce, or somewhere in between all of that. Today's interview is going to be for you. Sonia is an expert in this field. Not only is she the survivor of a toxic marriage herself, she's also, by the way, happily remarried for 14 years, but she's been through it, and she knows what that heartache feels like. But she's also a divorce attorney. And on top of that, she's an empowerment trainer, and she's an author. She's the author of Relationships Solutions and other books. But specifically, I want to talk about relationship solutions today because it's all about those strategies that can heal your heart and to really create that happiness you deserve. Because while you might think, it's fine, you could be hanging on to things in the past and not moving forward so that you can be in this thriving, happy place in life. She really offers such practical advice and hope to people whose lives have been upended by troubles in their marriage or the end of their marriage. And she teaches them how to dissolve those obstacles so that they can create fulfilling lives. It's such an empowering interview, and I'm so excited that she came on the show and is sharing this wisdom with you. Enjoy. Sonia, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm really, really excited to talk to you. We've got some good stuff to cover today, all about divorce, which many of our listeners have gone through or are going through or considering going through. And it's definitely the big reason why we have this show, right? Because after divorce, or the process of divorce, is where all of these challenges come in. So I'm really excited to talk with you about this because you have some really, really great insights and ways to make things a lot better on yourself and on your family. But before we do that, I'd love to hear a little bit about you and why you do this work.
Well, I am an attorney. I practice divorce and immigration law. I've been practicing for 26 years. And I am also a divorce survivor. I entered into a toxic marriage when I was 24 years old. I didn't know I was entering into a toxic relationship. And it was a very difficult situation for me. I came from a very conservative background. I am Catholic, and getting out of a marriage is difficult for us who are very faithful and face the consequences of of doing something that your community of faith is against. And also the fact that I was in an abusive situation, and it was something that I was not really sharing with the world. So it was a very difficult place for me. And at this point, I decided to share my story and to help people who find themselves in that situation to learn that there's so many things you can do to make your life better, and that a divorce, problems in your marriage are not the end of the road, but just a detour on the road to happiness, a happiness you can create on your own, regardless of your circumstances.
I totally agree, having been through it. One of the things that you talk about is moving on, and how to really do that. I want to talk about what it looks like to have not moved on. This was a big question I had for you, for people that think they've moved on, but maybe they haven't. What are the signs that you have not moved on from your divorce or from the relationship, especially if you're just going through the divorce?
Yeah, I think very often people think that once the divorce judgment is signed, that it's over, but it really isn't. Whether or not you have moved on is a state of mind. It is something that you feel in your heart, not something that comes in a piece of paper. And the most important thing is that you need to get over your ex. Very often people still have this attachment to their exes, and that you can't move on until you have already let go of that relationship. And you can do that, and you can be still stuck and hung up on your spouse in many different ways. One of them is having feelings of any kind towards your spouse, whether they're feelings of love, unrequited love, and a desire to reconciliate, or a desire to get back together, and that your spouse will see you differently, and things will go back to the way you hope they would be. And also when you have feelings of hatred and anger and resentment towards your spouse, because you might be doing things that keep you tied to this person by doing a number of different things, like spying on them on their social media, or having your kids give you information about what your spouse is doing, the people they're dating, how they're living, the things they're buying. And when you do things like that, you're sending the energy you need to rebuild your life in the wrong direction. You're sending it in the direction of your ex, not towards yourself, growing and creating a new life.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't agree more. And what's crazy is that as you're saying this, I and I'm sure you've seen this as well. There are people that are still doing those things, even despite having dated, even despite the fact that it's been many, many years. They just are still using that energy instead of on themselves to keep that attachment going.
Absolutely,
Whether it's a negative one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I like how you say moving on, and it's so true, is the best revenge. But how, like you said, if there's hatred, or there's hope, or any of those emotions that you mentioned, how do you begin to move on when there is this curiosity of what are they doing, or I want to find out for my kids what they're doing, or who are they dating, all of those things. How do you put a stop to all of that?
It's funny, because the way I look at it, and I realize some of the listeners are already past their divorce, but for those who are contemplating it or going through it at this point, the best time to do it is right now. And start empowering yourself and start rebuilding your life. And by that, I mean, start reconnecting with yourself. Start doing those things that bring you joy and that bring you pleasure, that make you feel fulfilled. Because when you feel fulfilled, you are using your energy to create a better self. And this is a better self that you can bring into a new relationship, that you can prime to bring into a new relationship, or a relationship with yourself, whether or not you decide to recouple in the future. And that is something that I started doing when I was still in a very toxic marriage. I decided to go to school. That's when I decided to go to law school, and I started building my own life by having new challenges academically, intellectually, a new set of friends, new activities that did not involve my spouse. So this is something that you can do at any point in the divorce continuum. Just start doing things that bring you fulfillment, getting used to your own company, starting to learn to love your company, and taking care of yourself, indulging in self-care and self-love, because you cannot love anyone until you love yourself first. So I think that really should be the focus. And it's something you can do any day, anytime. It's very easy, although we don't think it is.
Yeah, it's true. It certainly doesn't feel like it right at the beginning, right?
Yes. But you need to make an effort, and it's all about baby steps. It's not like you're going to wake up and you're going to be completely over all the things that happened in your marriage. You start going little by little, and before you know it, it will become second nature. And one day you'll wake up and it's like, oh my God, where have I been all this time? And then you can look to the future with joy and excitement.
There's something that you once said, which was, it's a divorce from your ex, not to your ex. And I was like, oh, that is so smart. Can you talk about that?
Yes, it's really funny because we think you're divorcing from your spouse, but to the degree that you're still attached to your spouse and to the marriage, you will not move on. So you really need to pay attention to the things that you are doing. How much time are you spending thinking about him? And what kind of feelings do you have when you do? Can you think about your marriage neutrally? When you don't, when your spouse comes up and you have negative feelings towards him, you know that you're not over. Or when you are with a new partner and you start constantly talking about your spouse, whether or not is positive or negative, you can't really reconnect with somebody else when you're still attached to a different person. It's actually unfair and dishonest and unhealthy, and doesn't really create a good foundation for a new relationship. And then you have people who are constantly going to court, looking for ways to keep on taking your husband to court and make them pay. It's that feeling of wanting your spouse to pay for whatever wrongs you feel were done to you, whether real or perceived, are some of the things that we do. Refusing to forgive, and like I said before, asking your kids to spy and obsessing, and actually too, posting on social media to try to get a reaction. Whether or not it's real, what you're doing is with the intent to do something to your spouse so he or she will notice. And disparaging your spouse with your kids too is one of the ways we do that. We stay attached to the relationship.
Absolutely. It's so hard to see when this is happening, because it does directly affect, when there's kids involved, it does directly affect them, because, first of all, the energy that could be going to them and of course to themselves is instead going over to, it almost becomes like this, it's almost like an obsession to constantly keep, what are they doing? What did they do to make me mad today? What can I, like you said, going back to court, another way to keep things, tied, and keeping that energy just locked into this like negativity. And instead of really seeing that there's this whole other life that you could be having that isn't so heavy, and that is actually so, filled with so much possibility.
Right. And it's very sad, and it can go on for years. When I worked in family court, there was this couple. Every single motion day, this woman would bring the man to court, and he would carry her papers and her boxes, and it was just relentless. She just wouldn't let go. And what did she think she was doing? She probably thought she was punishing him, but in fact, she was really punishing herself, because her mindset, all her thoughts were going in that direction and were full of venom. How can
Yeah.
you be happy? Trying to make somebody else unhappy is not going to make you happy. Your happiness is going to come from within, from the good thoughts that you experience.
Right. Well, the thing I know that you say moving on is the best revenge. And I think really there doesn't need to be any revenge at all. But if that is what, that seems to be the reason that moving on is so difficult, is because of getting that revenge. But I think the interesting thing that happens is once you do start to spend that time on yourself and creating your new life and putting the focus on your own happiness, you don't even care about the revenge part at all. Things start to
Exactly.
become, you're just very indifferent to it. And it's pretty amazing how that happens.
Yes, and I say moving on is the best revenge, and it's kind of tongue in cheek because the whole point is you have moved on. You don't think about it. You don't talk about it. People don't know that you went through a divorce. And I can tell you for myself, because I have been divorced for a very long time, and I divorced when I was on my last semester of law school. So many of the people that are in my new life were people who didn't know about my past. So many people don't even know that I was previously married. Oh, but you never mentioned your ex-husband. Why should I?
Yeah. Exactly. You're not identified by that. And that was another thing that I was going to say, is that I think I've seen a lot where it becomes a part of their identity, the bad ex that they had, the bad relationship that they have, the person that they have to co-parent with is so bad. It becomes part of their story, and they use that as an identity.
Yes. And it's a story. The story is really, the narrative is what controls your life. And you get to choose your narrative. It is something that
Absolutely.
you make that decision. Whatever your spouse did to you or didn't do, the important thing is just to let go. Let go of all the hopes and all the dreams and what you expected this person to be, what he or she was, what he or she was not. And you control the narrative. The story starts with today. What do I choose to create from this moment on with what I have right now, which is the present moment, instead of focusing on the past? And when you start approaching a divorce or the recovery from divorce from that standpoint, it's very liberating because you are tapping into your creativity.
Right. Exactly.
Hey guys, did you know that you can text us now? Like, if you want to be the first to know if we're going live or just launched a new episode, or maybe that we just went out on a date or had a fight, who's right, who's wrong, maybe we ate too much for dinner or missed a workout. No, seriously, we want to share more of what's going on in our lives, and we want to make sure that you don't miss out on anything new. So send a quick hello to 760-389-3722, and let's stay connected. All right, back to the show.
How can, when you're feeling all of these feelings, it's always nice to say, I want to have everybody ideally would like to have a smooth divorce or have a calm relationship with their ex, especially when there's kids involved. But if you haven't moved on, and if you are focused on, antagonizing your ex and putting so much energy into that, it makes it really, really difficult.
Oh, absolutely.
If you are, what are some tools or tips that you have for someone who maybe really, there was something really troubling that happened, and they do have, they have anger and they haven't quite forgiven yet, but they do know that they want to move on, and they know that they want to have the healthiest environment for their kids as possible. What are some ways to instill that, make it an amicable thing and make it easier, even though you're like, if you're secretly going, but he or she is such a jerk,
Yeah, the person may be really a jerk, but you need to, first of all, I think it's really important, whatever point you find yourself, to do some take some emotional inventory and try to get an understanding of what happened in the relationship, and try to understand, how did I get myself in this situation? What are my thought and behavior patterns that attracted me to my spouse? And what kind of interactions we had in this relationship? What did I contribute, if anything, to, the demise of the marriage? So you come from a place of clarity. And once you can try to see objectively what happened between the two of you, you can start having some compassion just for yourself and your ex. I think forgiveness is a very important thing you need to do. You need to, and by forgiveness, I don't mean condoning any behaviors that were wrong, but understanding that we all do things that are not necessarily from our highest self, and that most of us do it out of ignorance, and that your spouse may have acted in ways that were not nice to you. But for you to be able to be happy, you need to let those things go. So you need to look at forgiveness as an act of self-love, as opposed to something you're doing for your ex's benefit. And start going through the different things. I recommend this exercise, and I did this when I was going through my divorce, just going through the different things that were hurtful that you can think of. Just go and make a list of all of them and start writing them down, and burn the piece of paper, and then clear the energy, and have this conversation in your mind with your spouse. Like, you did this to me. This is how it felt. I choose, because it is a choice, I choose to forgive what you did, not because what you did was right, but because I love myself and I want to set myself free. And then you burn all those wrongs that you feel were done to you. And then you clear that energy out of your body. Drink a glass of water, and then move your body, go for a walk, and release it. I found that very, very cleansing, because there were a lot of different things that were very, very hurtful, and that I don't think my ex ever understood were wrong. So it's not like I was ever going to get any kind of reaction from him. So I had to do that act of kindness towards myself in order to feel free from all that destructive and toxic relationship.
That is so good. That is so good. That's an amazing practice, actually. I always think back to, if I know somebody who is going through the divorce, what are the things that I would have done differently? What are the things that you can, do right now? And it's sometimes like, oh my gosh, you can save so much grief. I mean, sometimes you do have to just go through the process, right? That's how we learn. But there are things that, I pretty much, like the things that you just said are just an amazing, amazing practice, especially during those really hard times. And it's really just identifying. Sometimes it's just putting words and just calling out what the feelings are that you're having, that just feels so much better. Because I think a lot of times, if we're hurt or we're angry, we don't even identify the reason that it's hurtful. We just feel hurt and angry, and we just want the other person to hurt as much.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. And, it's really funny, because as I was doing this exercise, I was doing it on my computer, because I was going to school, and I was away from home, and he was at home. And I wanted to keep that private. And I wrote that letter to him, and I kept on writing it. It was a long process, and he cracked my code for accessing that document, and he went through it. And which was really disrespectful on his part. But he made this very interesting comment, like, oh, I didn't realize, or I didn't know. So even though, he should have known better, these are things that were, very hurtful to a reasonable person. But yes, it is funny that he looked at it completely different. So yeah,
Yeah, yep. I know that situation. I totally know that situation.
I think we've all gone through that. Yes.
Yes, exactly. One thing I like to stress, and I, especially, you are you're an attorney. I'm sure you've seen so many different scenarios, but I really like to stress the importance because I think that as much as somebody could be listening to us right now and saying, well, yeah, of course you have to move on. And yes, of course, I need to focus on myself and be happy. And of course, I'm going to try to be amicable. But then there's all these excuses, but you don't know what I'm dealing with. I have this type of an ex, or you don't know what he or she did to me, or you don't understand. I'm trying to protect my kids, things like that. And I think there are definitely situations where you have to protect your kids, but I would say a lot of the situations that we hear of and see are a lot of it is based on ego, and the ego is just not letting go of hurt or whatever, you just cannot move on. But I really want to stress how important this is because of your kids and how it affects how ugly divorces and antagonizing each other, all of those things really, really affect the kids, even if you're not doing it directly in front of them. And I'm sure you've seen these type situations, and it's probably the thing that one of the biggest reasons that drove us to do this podcast is when you see kids suffering because of adults not handling it the way it should be handled.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it is so destructive. And I agree with you 100%. You don't have to do it in front of the kids. They are very perceptive and they understand. They pick up on your cues. And, there's so many different things that you can do that are subtle and passive aggressive that the children will notice and they will be hurt and they will feel like they have to pick sides. And that is not fair to them. Whatever beef you have with your ex, try to keep your kids out of it because they deserve to be happy too. Not just you. Everybody deserves to be happy. And you can choose to put your differences aside for the limited purpose of keeping your children safe. It doesn't mean you have to accept everything or love your spouse or be under their spell and do what they want you to do. You need to protect your children first. But then you need also to protect yourself and be happy. And by allowing someone to drag you into toxicity and negativity, you're not doing yourself any favors either.
Absolutely. Exactly. And I think, that's something that is so important to stress is that it's not I think sometimes people don't give up or don't let it go because it's almost like they think that they owe it to themselves to keep putting that person in their place when really what they owe to themselves is to let go. That's what actually would be the best thing that you could do for yourself.
Absolutely. I recall Dr. Wayne Dyer, he used to say, you can choose to be right or to be happy.
Yes.
So what is it going to be? I mean, so you're right. The person is a jerk or a monster or whatever. Fine. But are you at peace? And that's one question I invite everyone to ask themselves when they're having all these feelings and when they're getting upset over what somebody else did to them. It's like, wait a minute. Do I feel at peace? Can I choose to look at this in a different way that could liberate me from these feelings that are harming me?
Yep. I think it's so true because you also have to not worry what other people will think because, I know situations where people are like, well, I can't believe you just let that go. That's so wrong. And I remember, in my own mind, it was just like, certain things were just not worth a fight. It wasn't worth the energy. There are things that you just like Wayne Dyer says, how do you want to feel and what's this going to cause you? But I think what's sad is that people will still create more stress for themselves just because they are so eager to be right.
Yes. And I agree with you 100%. You really have to pick your battles because every battle you pick is going to take some of your energy away from you. And one thing I recommend to people, and they think it's insane, but when you're in a tug of war, if you let go of the rope and the other person is pulling really hard, what do you think is going to happen to them? They're going to fall on their butts.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone's really, really pulling just to get your attention, to get under your skin, if you release, if you let them go, they're going to be the ones falling on their butts. And you're
Yes.
just going to be free from having to make all that force to try to keep the power and hanging on to power. So you really need to pick, you really need to, instead of react, and I think that is the problem, that instead of responding, we react to what the other people are doing. If we took the time to just step back and say, wait a minute, what's going on here? Oh, my spouse is trying to get under my skin by being late for the exchanges, the visitation, which is such a controversial part of co-parenting, being late on purpose or bringing the kids late. So he was late 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Is it worth making a scene?
Exactly.
So are you going to respond? You SOB, you're late. You always do this to me. And there you go with the story, right? The narrative. It's like you're bringing in the story. So instead of just starting from that narrative, just stepping back and seeing yourself, okay, what am I thinking in this moment? Can I think something else? And can I respond in a different way? And what do you think that's going to do? You also need to pay attention to how that affects the other person. Because sometimes if someone's trying to get under your skin and you respond with kindness, they're going to be taken aback.
Yes, I love that. Well, okay, so to your point, I love to reverse engineer. I love to go, what's the optimal outcome? Let's look at that first. Instead of, reacting, like you said, just for the immediate stab, it's what is the optimal outcome? What do I want this to look like? What do I want my kids' experience to be? How do I want to feel? And oftentimes people say, well, I wish that we could just get along. I wish that it could be this way. And if you really mean that, you won't be doing the things that you're doing because you see that what it's resulting in is not leading you closer to that amicable divorce, that amicable relationship. It's not doing that. And so you have to stop doing that. And you start to realize, like you said, well, actually, if I do respond in kindness, like, hey, no worry, if, instead of being mad, you're always late, you don't give a crap, blah, 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 blah. Instead of just saying, hey, is everything okay? No worries. We have everything handled. And you just make it a kind thing. That person will probably then, oh yeah, I'm so sorry. I apologize. And probably make a better effort next time instead of like not giving a crap themselves because you were so mean about it.
Right. And also just the fact that you responded with kindness. If what they wanted was to start a scene and you're not giving them that pleasure.
Yes.
They may not do it again. That's it. It's like, okay, this trick doesn't work anymore.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh. Well, I love the path that you took. It's super inspiring. And having been through the experience yourself, I know that you're helping your clients. I also know that you're helping a ton of people with your books. And I'd love to touch on your books and what they're about and how people can find them.
Oh, yes. I had wanted to be a writer since I was a teenager. And since I opened my private practice, I had more time to do different things. And I got inspired to write after going to a forgiveness retreat for women and knowing how many women were still hurting over their current marriages or past divorces, even though they had taken place years ago. So I was inspired to write my first book for women, which was entitled Solve the Divorce Dilemma. Do you keep your husband or do you post him on Craigslist? And that book is geared mostly for women who are contemplating the divorce decision, because that's where I was hurting the most. And there's very little devoted to making the divorce decision as compared to divorce recovery or the aspects of divorce, like the legal and financial and different aspects, parenting. So I decided to write the book that I wish had existed when I was struggling, when I felt trapped in a toxic relationship. So Solve the Divorce Dilemma essentially walks you through the whole process of taking emotional inventory, doing a personal journey of self-discovery, and try to understand how you ended up in this relationship. gaining more clarity so you can decide what you need from a relationship. Can you create it with your spouse? And if you can't, how to divorce graciously and create a life you love, whether you stay or you go. And this book actually was popular with men. Men started reading the book, but complaining that it was too biased for women, right? Duh.
Yeah.
So I wrote an expanded gender neutral version. I just published it in November, and it's entitled Relationship Solutions, Effective Strategies to Heal Your Heart and Create the Happiness You Deserve. And it contains much of the wisdom from Solve the Divorce Dilemma, but it's amplified to emphasize that when we divorce, it is not a failure, and that we can start creating and reframing the divorce process or our marital problems from a failure to a detour on a road to happiness, and emphasizing how we can start creating that happiness and remaining centered during the divorce process.
Oh, that is so great. I wish I had had that as well.
Yes, I wish I had it.
So where can our listeners find more about information about you and also about your books?
The best way to learn about me is visiting my website, soniafrontera.com. That's www.soniafrontera.com. And there you will find links to my social media. And also you can send me a message there, and you can learn about my books. My books are available online everywhere: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and independent online bookstores.
Oh, fantastic. And you actually had something, a special offer for our listeners as well.
Absolutely. The first 5 listeners who are interested in the book and send me an email, I will give them a free ebook. I will give them a free copy of Relationship Solutions by emailing me. So
that is so awesome.
Rush.
I love it. So, and should they reach out through your site at soniafrontera.com?
Yes, they can reach me at
Okay,
soniafrontera.com.
Ah, perfect. Okay. And we will have that all noted in the show notes as well, so that those 5 people don't miss out. So get on it.
That's right. And everybody else, they can just, come and visit, because I have other free resources available on the website.
Fantastic. Sonia, this was so awesome. This is so helpful too. And I hope that people listening, whether you've identified yourself in these behaviors, or you were kind of questioning, I think I moved on, maybe I haven't, or you're just wondering, like, is it impacting your happiness and your kids and your family, or maybe even better, somebody that is in that position. I would definitely share this podcast with them, just to get a little bit of an outside look on, how much better your life could be once you let go and you really get to open the doors to incredible possibilities. So thank you so much for sharing, Sonia.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening. And we like to say, if you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone you love, and be bold enough to share it with someone you don't. See you next time.